So we have this application, it has this box, enter a dog breed, and so I can start typing here like C, and I wish this wouldn't appear, that's the browser trying to help me out, but as I type along, it shows me up to 10 suggestions to complete this with the dog breed. And if you recall, what's happening is as I type, every time I type, JavaScript is looking at what I type, it's sending it to the server, independently of it's not like a full page refresh. JavaScript is directly contacting the server, sending it the CO in this case, getting back the information that it needs to fill this menu in. So that's called Ajax. This is happening sort of behind the scenes in the browser. And then when I finally complete, in addition to sending me back the completions, there's only one that's hidden by this browser suggestion. Sends me back this, which verifies that I've typed in a complete dog name. And it sends me back a link to an image so I can display an image that I typed the dog name. And this was all being, so this was an illustration of how Ajax is working. And we had looked last time at what was happening on the browser side. And I just want to quickly go over that since it's been 12 days. And then we'll look at what's happening over on the server side. So, this is Ajax, and under web content I have this page called, must be breeds.html is what I was looking at. So, there's a fair amount of JavaScript in here, and it's a mixture of Ajax and non-Ajax because I did this from last year. So I'm not going to go over the JavaScript that actually takes care of the combination of JavaScript and CSS that makes the pull-down menu work. You can figure out how that works. That's not my main point. I just want to show you what happens when something is clicked. So it's right here. I'll come down to here. There's this onChange button right here. This onChange handler on the pull-down menu, and then onKeyUp up there on the input box. So we've got those two things going on. And when either is typed, some stuff is happening, like menu activate happens, which makes the menu appear. But ultimately, it's this call to refresh that I care about. So let's look. Refresh is what interacts with the server. So refresh is going to take care of the aspects I care about. So we'll go up and look at what refresh is. That's right here. So I've written, the calls to refresh is passing in the text that was just in the partial dog name that was entered into that box. So when the key is lifted or when the menu item is selected, refresh is called. And what refresh does is make an Ajax call. And Ajax there's support for Ajax built into jQuery. And the method that we're using is $.get. So it's making a GET request on the server. This is the relative URL to invoke. So that's the URL for the servlet to invoke. So it's calling a show breed servlet. This is a JavaScript object. That's the field name and that's the value. And that's how we pass, that's passed as the parameters to the server. So prefix is the name of the parameter. Text is the actual text that was in the box that's being passed in. And you can have it comma separated and have a whole bunch of parameters if you want. And this is the callback that's made after the servlet responds. So what happens is we invoke the servlet with these parameters, and when a response comes back, the text of the response, the full text of the response, is passed to show 10 choices. So whatever the servlet spits out is what's passed to show 10 choices. Show 10 choices then takes the response. The servlet we're using here has put a bunch of information on different lines. And we just split the lines apart, and then we go about populating the pull-down menu and populating the image and populating the caption. And that's just standard kind of JavaScript. So this is the Ajax call. And it happens asynchronously. You make the call, and at some point in the future, the callback is invoked. it takes care of modifying the page. So to make use of Ajax, you have to know this. You have to know how to invoke the servlet. And then you have to write code which takes the response and then edits the HTML page to update it in some way. But that's just the kind of thing you do when you wrote that JavaScript game. Right? It's just taking, it's just doing something. It's just, instead of doing it in response to a user action, you're modifying the page in response to this callback. Yeah?
How do you pass the parameter response? So,
Oh, it's passed. This callback has to take one parameter. And that parameter is, in this case, upon response. And so when this callback is called, the value of that parameter is the text that came back from the server. It's the whole thing. Now, to demonstrate what's going on here, I'm going to go back. This, I just invoked that servlet directly. So you see, it says up there, show breeds $prefix equals C. So that's exactly the kind of call that's being made from inside the browser each time I call $.get. And this is exactly what's coming back. That's the text that's coming back from the server. And that's the text that's being passed as the response parameter to that method that you just asked about. So what my JavaScript code has to do when it gets invoked, when that callback gets invoked, is it has to say, okay, that first line up there is the caption. So it displays that as the caption of the picture. The next line is the URL of the image to display. So it pastes that into the right spot in the HTML. Then there's a number that says how many lines follow. And then there are 10 lines in this case, and each of those 10 lines is what's used to fill in and pull in the menu. So the JavaScript has to parse through that. If I change the parameter up here, if I say COL, let's say I do COL, then I'm going to get back only one suggestion, because that's all that matches. If I spell out the whole dog name, then instead of getting back blank.jpg, since I've got a match, I'm getting an actual image of a colleague from some web page. But the HTML, the JavaScript works the same way every time. It just takes these lines, which I've formatted according to some protocol I made with myself. I just decided to be line-oriented. Decompose it. Manipulate the web page. Paste stuff in. Okay, so that's what's happening on the browser side. It makes the call and call back and takes this stuff apart. So next I want to show you what's happening on the server side. Let me see if there are any questions about the browser, the JavaScript. Yeah?
So when we do the get call, the first parameter you said was the servlet, right?
Right, so that's the, whatever, show breeds.
How does it know where to find it exactly? How does it know where to find that servlet?
Well, it's a relative URL. And so the web page that we're sitting on, let me go back to,
I'm assuming your servlets are in a different directory, right?
well, what it does is, okay, we're on this page, breeds.html. And so it takes that show breeds, and it's relative to this URL, so it just turns this into Ajax/showbreeds. Right? It just composes a URL. Sticks prefix equals whatever I told it to use, and sends it to the server. The browser doesn't figure anything out. It just composes a URL, sends it to the server, and the server, it's nothing particular to Ajax, it just looks at the URL. And what the server does is it sees, okay, Ajax. So Ajax is the context name, so it goes finds the Ajax application. And then you've configured the Ajax application so that you've named all the servlets, and so it looks for the one that's named show breeds and runs it. That's all handled by Tomcat. Okay, any other questions? Okay, server side. So, as always, it's confusing because this is browser-side code, and up here is the server-side code. It's all in the same project. You just have to keep demonstrate what's where. So, again, we started talking about this last time. Here is breeds.java, which is what we just invoked. So you can see it's a servlet called show breeds. So that's ties into what I just said. That's how it finds the servlet. We tagged it. And all show breeds is doing is generating output. Now you see it takes a request object, a response object, and then an array list of matching breed names. So there's obviously some, this is extending, notice it extends the class breeds base. So a lot of computations happening there. But all it's doing is it's setting the content type to plain, and then it's outputting the caption. I guess I'm not showing you all the parameters there, I just realized. Let me reveal all this. Okay, so there's the request, the response. Breeds, caption, picture. So all it's doing is it's printing the caption, the picture, the size of the matching breeds, every entry in the matching breeds, and closing the output. So that's really easy. The real work is being done up here in breeds base. There's breeds base. So what's going to happen here is it has the do post method that's being invoked. So I'm turning off caching. I guess I had some problem with caching happening. I grabbed that prefix parameter right there. I have a method called, well, I'll show you what I do here. I create an array list that's empty that's going to be my matching breeds. So it starts out life empty. The caption starts out life being a space. And the picture starts off life being blank.jpg. Okay. I just confused myself. What's going on here? Take a second. I had spring break too. Oh, okay. There's an array down here. So I have this array down here, which I grabbed off of the American Kennel Club website. So it's just all the breeds known to the American Kennel Club. Okay. So I am, where am I? Picture. So here in the servlet, I iterate through my breeds array. And what this says is matching breeds.size is less than 10, so less than or equal to 10. So I iterate through the breeds array looking for matches until I either find all the matches there are or I find 10 matches. And if my breed name starts with that prefix string, I add it to my array of matching breeds. And if it's an exact match, then I set the caption and I set the picture. I call that picture. So that's just iterating through the array looking for matches. And then ultimately an output. And then I call generate output, which you looked at before in the base class, which actually spits all this stuff out. Then to actually find a matching picture, I scrape Google. So what happens is my server makes a call to Google Images, gets back a bunch of images, and finds one and hopes it's a picture of the animal. And usually it works. And I've yet to be completely embarrassed in class. I can imagine a disaster scenario. I mean, who knows what images are going to be found? Well, so it's kind of a chancy thing. But essentially, I create a URL that's going off to Google and passing the partial prefix, or passing the breed name as the image to search for. And then this is, I create the string, I create a URL from it, I create a URL connection, I set a whole bunch of properties. So I set the user agent, the request method, and so forth. I'm pretending to be a browser here. And then when I've got all these headers set, I make the connection and send the information. Now, the reason I do all this stuff, particularly this one here, I set the user agent. I'm posing as Mozilla. Because I found once upon a time, if I didn't do this, Google would not respond. It would send me back a 404 or something. Because it doesn't want, Google makes its living scraping people's websites for content. But it does not like re-scrape itself, but it can't really prevent it. But it can deter, it's not much deterrence, but it took me a few tries to realize I had to pose as a browser for Google to reject my search request. So this violates the terms of service of Google, by the way, so I guess they can cut me off if they want to. Anyway, I set up the connection, I make the connection, then I get the response back, and I just parse through it, and I'm just parsing through it, looking for something that says image URL equals. And then you get back a page full of URLs, you just got to find one that works. And what I discovered was this worked fine last year, and then I went to test it for spring break, and it didn't work anymore because they changed the format of the response page. That's the problem with scraping. It's not an API that you can count on. It's just they decide they want to change the way they format their response, they change it. And anybody that's trying to extract information from that HTML has got to change the way they do it too. So essentially, I'm just getting back a string, which is all the HTML that would be displayed in the browser, body of the browser. And I'm just going through it looking for an image. And pulling it out. Sometimes there's some encoded characters that have that percent sign. I was too lazy to decode it, so I just throw that away and look for another. And usually I manage to get a picture of the dog after that. And that's all sent back. So the browser doesn't do much. It lets the server take care of scraping Google, and it lets it look through its database of dog breeds. And then it sends a response back. And not all it happens every key press. Okay? So your next assignment will involve Ajax. I'm not done talking about Ajax yet, but I just want to remind you that your next assignment, this is our recurring problem where you're worried about other things right now, but be worried about this next week. So now's a good time to figure this out. Let me see if there are any questions I can answer at this point about Ajax. Yeah.
So usually when we use Ajax, when you're configuring like the server yourself and can determine what your response system will look like, right?
Well, yeah, Ajax, you use Ajax, yeah, you've got to be writing the application.
Right.
Well, no, not really. I mean, yeah.
It's like your Google one, like you said, if they change something, you have to change your,
Well,
you deal with it.
right, but this has nothing to do with Ajax. This is just, so scraping just refers to writing a program which accesses some other website and then gets the response back and then examines the HTML to extract information. And if Java, if Google exposed, maybe they do, but if they exposed a nice URL, a nice API that let me, invoke methods on their server, via Ajax, for example, to get stuff back, images back, I wouldn't have to go to this rigmarole. Yeah.
Is there a way to encourage people to use an API rather than having to do scraping? Like we're in a situation with one of the things I'm working on where we have to scrape and we use Beautiful Soup to parse their HTML and build models and things.
Yeah.
And it's really frustrating because if they change that at all, right, it's really difficult for us.
Well, we'll look later in the semester, we'll look at what are web services.
Right.
And so web services is where, like Google could deploy a web service that said, if you want to be able to search, programmatically search for images, here's the way to do it.
Does that make it more secure for them, or is it just a convenience factor for developers?
It makes it more convenient for developers.
I was under the impression, excuse me, that the jQuery Git can only pull from the current server it's on, right? Or can it pull from anywhere else?
No, the jQuery get can only pull from the server from whence it came. However, so these web services you have to exploit on the server.
So you would make a request to the server can make the request to the...
We'd be doing exactly the same thing here, but instead of making a URL request and getting back an HTML page and searching through it to hopefully find what we're after, we would be making Java calls that would be taking care of going across the web and bringing back the Java object and working on it that way. So it would look more like a method call than this.
Okay.
Now, over the break, I was playing around with Java, not with Java, with Google Earth. So Google Earth does expose an API where you can create web pages that have the Google Earth maps, and you can configure the controls and do all kinds of stuff. And that's done with Ajax from inside your browser. But because of the restriction that a browser can't directly access some of the server, it requires a plugin.
Mhm.
So if you want to use that Google, if you want to use the Google Maps and the Google Earth API directly from the browser, you have to get a plugin that then bypasses that security restriction inside your browser. And you're basically making Ajax calls directly to Google. Okay, any other questions? All right, we'll take a break, and then we're going to look at a different way to package the response that's actually better than the lines.